I tried to make a nice picture of, like, here's a river, there's one fish which literally is dead and he's going with the flow. And there's another fish which is working quite hard and he's hopping his way up the river. And it's one of these ones where it sort of makes me feel slightly uncomfortable in a way, but it sort of also challenges me. It makes me think, okay, what am I doing where I'm just sitting back and letting life come at me? Maybe I can steer it a bit my own.
And I went through a process to discover happiness, and it was through dreaming and opening yourself up to dream and be willing to dream, I think, was the kind of process I went through. And from that point, everything improved in our design DNA. All the designs that came after that were all better.
When I think of designer, I automatically think of someone confidently wearing, a black roll neck, designer glasses, great hair, which confirms what I already know, that I am the least cool person here. Hello and welcome to Sketchplanations, the podcast. If this podcast were a board game, it would be something like the Game of Life. Not the one we all played in the 80s and 90s, but the modern version. Fast-paced with twists and turns, like a library of Agatha Christie novels packed into a toboggan and sent down the Cresta run. In the game and in this podcast, there are ups and downs. There's choice and reward. There's the odd lesson learnt. There's entertaining artwork. And of course, there's a bit of fun. The only real difference is the lack of spinny wheel thing, but we are working on that. I'm Rob Bell, happy to be the banker. And playing with me, up front, leading the way with a packed car and plenty of moolah, it's Jono Hay. And having recently acquired an action card, sending him on the holiday of a lifetime, his fortunes quickly reversed, as in his next two moves, he had a car accident and lost his house to a fire. Despite that, he still plays the game with a huge smile on his face. It's plucky Tom Pellerow. Hello, chaps.
Good evening. Someone on The Apprentice is approaching my record. They've two boys this year have just won lost 6 tasks in a row.
Oh, this is good.
I was only 5 in a row. I did lose 8 in the end, so they still have a bit off my record totally. But
they've lost 6 in a row already.
In a row.
Oh, so they've surpassed your record.
The 5 in a row, but they've still got to lose 2 more, or they've got to survive for a little bit longer to beat the all-comers record. Is that really a right word for it?
All-time, all-star record.
Zero star.
And that is a game, isn't it, in a way, The Apprentice?
Yeah. There's
high
a
stakes
lot of
game
luck involved in it, I must admit. It's a lot of luck.
Well, as with the Game of Life. Did you guys ever play the Game of Life? Do you know the one I mean?
The little car with the sticks.
Yeah, and you put your family in it.
And a spinner, and
you can get married
some
and
mountainy
kids.
bits. What were the mountainy bits?
Yeah.
The game of stereotypes, wasn't it, really?
Yes, it is exactly that, Jono.
Yeah, it's funny when you play it now.
So there are more modern versions, and now you can adopt pets. There are some weird action cards where you have to get up and do a dance, or I don't know, post something on TikTok. I don't know, but it's a lot more. It's modernised.
Thankfully, a lot of the things from our youth, you kind of look at now, or you try and play with your children. You're like, oh gosh, this questionable.
We love playing Hotel in our family. Amongst my
Hotel's
sister
excellent.
and I. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
It's kind of a faster-paced Monopoly type thing.
Yeah, and you get
a
to
bit
build stuff.
sexier. Yeah, big lovely hotels with swimming pools and the facilities. How many nights are you staying? Oh, 6, unlucky.
It's good. I like Hotel. Hard to get hold of these days.
Oh right, yeah. Well, we're still using the old version from
Get a few bob for that.
Probably the 90s actually.
Yeah.
It's going nowhere. You're pretty good with your games, John. And Tommy, you've probably got loads as well, haven't you? Board games kicking about the house that you pull out every now and then?
A lot of games. I'm not into the Monopoly. Jack really enjoys Monopoly. I'm like, oh gosh, it takes so long. But yeah, Jono is a master, has a fantastic collection, and used to invent board games, Jono, or has invented board games.
It's fun inventing games, yeah. I like inventing games. Don't have a lot of time for it now.
We should do more of that, actually.
Yeah, it's just good fun. Yeah, we should do that.
Revive it. My absolute favourite podcast, Ellis and John on BBC.
So your absolute favourite podcast, Sketchplanations?
Sorry,
your second.
I'll start again. So my second favourite podcast in the world ever after Sketchplanations, the podcast, is Ellis and John show on 5 Live or on BBC Sounds, and they do a made-up game every week where listeners send in a made-up game and then they play it. It's brilliant. I love it. It's very good. Because when you are kind of bored and there's nothing to do, like kind of what was similar to what we were saying last time, so you're delayed, waiting for a plane or a train or something, it's great fun just to come up with a game and play that with your mates.
Do you know, we were on the train the other day and asked ChatGPT for a game that you could play just with your fingers and the other person. It came up with some quite good ones. You could try it, asking ChatGPT for making. I don't know if it made it up or if it found it, but it made up some quite good games, I thought.
It's great.
Good. Let's try it.
Well, whether it's Monopoly, chess, or pick-up sticks that floats your boat, on Sketchplanations the podcast, we play by the rules. So lay out the board and deal out the cards. Here's the dice. Go on. Shake, shake, shake for a big one. It's a 6. Let's podcast. This week, I'm delighted to welcome another guest into our podcast family. Now, they've selected a couple of Jono's sketches they'd like to explore a bit more with us, and we're excited to find out how they relate to their life and to their work. But before we get into the episode properly, just a reminder that the first sketch we discuss on this episode will feature as the artwork for the episode, and you'll be able to see that up on your podcast player display screens. And then any other sketches that we talk about, I will make sure I include a link to in the description down below. And as always, we love to hear from you, our listeners, on the topics and the themes that we cover, and you can send your emails to
hello@sketchplanations.com.
Thank you, Tommy. Better every week. Yeah. And finally, if you enjoy the pods, we'd love you to tell a few more people about it. I mean, we now have listeners from over 100 countries in the world, and it'd be great to get more people involved. Not necessarily from different countries. I mean, you could tell someone you sit next to at work, or someone you're sat next to right now on the train or on the bus. In fact, I dare you to do that right now. And if you do, tell us how it went. Tommy?
hello@sketchplanations.com.
Lovely. Right, our guest on the podcast this week maintains a very simple outline of their professional activities up on LinkedIn. It simply reads, industrial designer, photographer, filmmaker. And I have to say there's a joy in this simplicity for me. But having hung out and worked with our guest a number of times, I know there's a lot of very fine attention to detail that goes into all of his creations. Gordon Fraser studied innovative product design at the University of Dundee and is now the co-founder and head designer at Marloe Watch Company. A true creative, he oversees the aesthetics of the business, from the design of the watches to the films on its website, down to the colour palettes of the branding. He also writes all the company's copy. And, pertinently for this podcast, when it comes to getting his initial ideas down and recorded somewhere, Gordon, I know, is a big fan of filling his sketchbooks. Gordon, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much for having me. Delighted to be here.
It is lovely. Now, I very much feel like I'm the odd one out in this kind of coming together here, because upsettingly for me, I'm the only one who's not a designer. And I say upsettingly because in my mind, the word designer is pretty much synonymous with cool. Right? Which confirms what I already know, that I am the least cool person here. You know, when I think of designer, I automatically think of someone confidently wearing, a black roll neck, designer glasses, expensive laptop, great hair. I mean, but when you talk about being a designer, Gordon, what do you talk about? What does it mean to you? And Tommy, Jono, I'd be interested to hear your take on this as well.
I think, so we're 10 years old next year. And
as Marloe Watch Company?
The Marloe Watch Company, yes. So I've been doing what I do now for almost 10 years. And for 8 of those 10 years, I've had crushing self-doubt and insecurity and imposter syndrome. So being a designer for me is torturous, because I guess in our company especially, because I'm this kind of sole designer for everything that we do, it all comes back to me. You know, I don't design with a committee of people, and we don't discuss it, and it's like together we have decided this. It very much, the axe falls directly on me. So It's an interesting position, being a designer in this business.
I understand that, because your work is, publicly viewed, analysed, critiqued, right? Through sales, I guess.
Aye. There's kind of multiple phases to the scrutiny that goes on with us. The sales are a really important thing because we're a business, and that's where Oliver, the other co-founder, that's where his kind of domain is, and he stresses about that stuff. But for me, I think the scrutiny comes in because we're an e-commerce business. A lot of people are looking at our stuff on big screens and with macro shots and really blown up versions of what we do, and so a lot of people can get quite passionate about very small details on our watches that in reality you more often than not can't see. So there's like an added element of extra macro scrutiny. So it's just one of the pitfalls of being online. People can't see the scale of things that we do.
Yeah, Tommy, is that similar for you? Because you design and bring products to market as well, and I guess I'm assuming the majority of your sales online. I don't actually know.
No, in terms of the majority of our sales are through retailers.
Okay.
It's an ASOS and Argos, about 80%. It's changing a little bit with more and more marketplaces. I'd certainly relate to the torturous aspect of being a designer, an inventor. I sort of feel myself more as a sort of inventor than designer. But actually, the reality is a lot of people talk to me will tell me that I'm an entrepreneur, which I feel very uncomfortable about, because I'm not very, and I also therefore relate to Gordon's point about the sort of imposter syndrome. I've been very well supported by Lord Sugar and his team, and by others in his team. And I was also, I've got to say, one of the best things about winning this show was that someone backed me. And that has stayed with me for quite a long time, which is an amazingly fortunate thing to have happened to me. But yeah, designing, inventing is amazing, but it's also quite torturous in terms of the unknown. You kind of present these things and you're like, I hope they like it. I really hope they like it. And that's not really a very good way to be trying to pitch things either. So I get involved less and less in the sales these days, because sort of probably I'm a bit too desperate in some respects. Whereas the salespeople are like, yeah, you want this, you're going to take this, you're going to put this in from July, aren't you? Because it's brilliant. We've been designing it, it's brilliant. And I'd be like, well, please take it, it's lovely. I put a lot of effort in.
It's kind of like that in the watch business. We do a lot of things behind closed doors. And you kind of work up to this grand reveal and you go, ta-da! And then you're immediately, where you sit. And we've tried to get ahead of that by kind of opening up the doors to what we do and show people how we go about doing things.
Yes.
Kind of as a way to include people, because this industry is very insular and very kind of, everybody keeps their close counsel. So we've tried to open up that kind of window to come in and see how we do things. And also to avoid this kind of crushing blow when people go, that's disgusting, what are you playing at? But again, by opening the doors, you're also opening the doors to mid-process scrutiny as well. Oh, I hate that. I hope you're going to change that for the end of the kind of production.
So it's not always the best way of going.
So you can't win no matter what you do.
No. So Johnny, the work that you bring to the world is slightly different in that you can, and I might be naive here, but you can make changes to it continuously, right? It's not like, well, you've used this website and this service now and we fixed something, you've had your go, sorry you didn't get the good version. They can come back to it and get an improved, or if bugs are fixed.
Yeah, definitely. Like more of my design work in the last 10-15 years has been online, and it's fundamentally just a very different thing, I think, from I have massive respect for making physical products and making watches and putting physical products which then go into stores and then get sold that way. Like, you just have so much more flexibility and feedback in online design that you don't have. And I'd try always to make it. I mean, you can't always go from. You can't do everything step by step. Sometimes you've got to make jumps, but as much as possible, you try and get. I basically see the process as getting confidence, right? Like, at the beginning, you've got a bunch of ideas and you don't know what's right. And at the end, you've got one idea and you know it's going to be great. And so to me, that's what I want to get to. And I want to get to that as soon as possible. Yeah. Before... Yeah, because it's a horrible moment if you put it out there and you've worked really hard on it and it's not right. And software, I think, allows you to do that a lot more. You get so much more analytics. You can put feedback. You can keep tweaking things, modifying things. I mean, it's never done, but yeah, in some ways, it makes it way easier to do things. Yeah.
And I touched on this in the intro a bit, Gordon, but the fact that you use sketchbooks. I think I'm right in saying that. Is that important to you? Is that an important part of your design process? Getting those initial ideas down, having somewhere to record that so that you know you can come back to it. It isn't lost.
Aye. I think I've heard a lot of people talk about watch design as this kind of really arty flowing, perfection. You open the sketchbook, it's like, whoa, look at all these lovely My sketchbooks are horrible. They're absolutely horrible. They're a mess of just horrible wee sketches, but it's a way for me to catalogue little things that I've thought about and then I can reference later. It's not an exercise in kind of beauty. It's just a kind of logging process. And I use physical sketchbooks to do that, but I also do a lot of sketching in the computer. So the software that I use to eventually design our watches for manufacture, I also do a lot of sketching in that kind of platform, testing ideas out. That looks horrible. Kind of rinse and repeat quite a lot. So I guess you could call that sketching as well. And it date stamps it. The program you use kind of gives you milestones that you can always come back to. So you go down a rabbit hole and then you divert somewhere, you can always come back and maybe explore that idea a wee bit more. So it's kind of a 3D version of sketching in a way. But in terms of sketchbooks, they're just a way for me to get things out of here, my mind, and down on the page. Yeah, which I find really important in the stuff I do. And I know John and Tommy. I know you. But saying, well, Jono, you've Sketchplanations is an example of your prolific sketching, shall we say?
I have a big collection of sketchbooks for work and personal projects over the years. Yeah. A lot. Right, let's get on to the first sketch that you selected, Gordon. And so it's called Only Dead Fish Go With The Flow. Now, when I told Jono that this was what you'd chosen, I remember his face kind of showed an initial surprise, I think it probably was, followed by a kind of, I think what I'll describe as like a kind of deep approval. Like, oh yeah. I remember it distinctly. It was like, okay, yeah. Do you remember that, Jono?
I do, yeah. I was surprised.
Brilliant.
First up, Jono, do you want to describe the sketch and tell us what made you want to create it? What made you want to communicate the meaning behind the sketch?
Yeah, and I should first say where it's from as well, which was I learned this tiny little phrase from a book called Improv Wisdom by Patricia Ryan Madsen, and it has a lot of things about what you can learn from improv that you can apply to your life. As it happens, this little snippet she said she saw in a pub over the fireplace in Wales, and I just thought it was such a nice, memorable way to conjure up an approach to life. I actually got quite interesting feedback about this one. Like, a lot of people quite strongly disagreed with it, but for me, I liked it essentially. So I drew it, right? So I tried to make a nice picture of here's a river. There's one fish which literally is dead and he's going with the flow, and there's another fish which is working quite hard and he's hopping his way up the river. And it's one of these ones where it sort of makes me feel slightly uncomfortable in a way, but it sort of also challenges me, or it makes me think, okay, what am I doing where I'm just sitting back and letting life come at me? Maybe I can steer it a bit my own. So that's what the sketch is about. That's where I learned it. And I think it's a really interesting little reminder.
It's a nice, colourful sketch as well. It's a full block colour scene, isn't it?
Yeah, and I tried to leverage what I've learned from Calvin and Hobbes over the years.
Nice.
And Bill Watterson's beautiful sketches.
Yeah. Great. All right, so Gordon, what is it about this sketch and that meaning behind it that appeals to you? And I mean, we kind of touched on it a little bit earlier, I think, but is this purely in your professional life or kind of wider, would you say?
I think it's just the way I approach things personally to every kind of creative outlet that I have.
Yeah.
But you would imagine that creativity and uniqueness in Watchland is a great selling point. You know, you come into this industry, you think, right, I'm going to do things differently. I'm going to do things so that somebody looks at it and go, oh, I've never seen that before. And so you do that, and then you get blowback because that's not what the market wants. It's a kind of tension of the industry and the market, and that people, you get multiple approaches to watches. You get the people who are boffins, the spec killers, and they go looking for what it has technically, and that's their approach to it. And then you get the people who buy watches as a way of either status symbol or a measure of self-worth. Look at how good I'm doing, or look at me, or whatever. And then you get the guys who can't get there financially, and so want something that looks like that but isn't that. It has all the stuff that other one has. And then you get the lay people who just love the look of it, and they don't care what it has inside it, or it's either a cost decision or they just love it and they go for it.
Yeah.
And so uniqueness to design is an interesting thing. You know, if you go with the flow, you have a better chance at success in this industry. Whereas if you're a dead fish, and carve your own path, you often end up a dead fish. There's no really any way out. We've got a great example. When we were designing our first dive watch, we thought we're going to go against every expectation here, and we're going to really go to town and do what we think a dive watch should look like. How it should look like if it's going to operate in that environment. And we did it, and we went, ta-da! And everyone went, oh, no, absolutely not. Where's the polished case, and where's the ceramic bezel? And, and it was a real issue, because we thought we were being really clever, and we'll capture the imaginations of everyone. But in reality, we should have just went with the flow and did what people were looking for.
So is it kind of, is it horses for courses? Is it kind of pick and choose if you want to be the dead fish going with the flow, or the live fish swimming your own path and fighting against the norm a bit? Well,
that's when you have to start thinking on with the business head as well. What do we want to be around longer than a year? If not, do something really unique and then see what happens. So there's a balance to be struck, I think. And certainly, we're about to, we're in the process of redesigning and relaunching the Morar as a kind of phase 2.
The dive watch, the Morar, the dive watch.
Yeah. And that is a lot more market aligned in terms of what it looks like and what specs it has, and what people are looking for. But then the challenge is to make it unique whilst conforming to these preordained expectations.
Yeah.
So as much as I would love to be the kind of live salmon leaping over, the water and going one way, sometimes you have to just, go with it.
I think that's a really important point, Gordon, because it's lovely to sit here and think, yeah, I'm that live fish. I am carving out my own path here, and the rest of you can do one. But Yeah, when reality hits, it can be a bit different. Jono, Tommy, what do you feel? What's your perspectives and experience with taking this kind of approach?
It's interesting, particularly I think with products. It was something I learned in a class I took, which was that products are created by the culture and products create the culture, and it's this sort of like cyclical thing. So the thing that is going to succeed now is going to succeed now because what everybody is ready for now. And yet when somebody creates something new, you shift the culture, but it's very hard, I think, to your point, Gordon, you can't like just come in from left field and do this because people won't always be ready for that. Yeah. But gradually things do change, right? Like, but there's this sort of window of changeability, or you have to find the right people for it. Like maybe some people really loved your stuff, but that's not going to work mass market. It's not going to be enough sales to make a business in your particular case, Other domains, maybe you can get away with just go, I'm going to find my niche of customers who get this new thing that I'm doing, and that's enough. So I think it depends quite a lot. So for example, I don't know, it maybe software where overheads can be a bit lower and you can change stuff a bit smaller. It's much easier to get stuff out. Maybe you can serve much smaller markets with something that is just for those people, and it doesn't matter. If you want to start a newsletter right now, talking about some completely unique thing, which is just you and 50 other people, you can do it. It will hardly cost you anything. But if you want to start a watch company and you want to sell a lot of watches, then it has to somehow meet what the culture is ready for. So, yeah, I think it's a dilemma. But on the other hand, you also you have to ask yourself what you want to do. You don't do this, Gordon, either, right? Like you say that, but all your stuff is beautiful and it's not run of the mill, like cookie cutter products, right? So you are pushing the boundaries at the same time as meeting the needs of the culture at the time.
I guess I think what's happened since the Mora dive watch was launched, they sat and nobody was interested for ages and ages. You had the early adopters who were straight on, and they got it. They got it. I understand what you were trying to do with this, but it took a long while for those the first kind of batch to sell out, and it was only at that point that once they'd all gone and people couldn't get them, and they watched all the kind of the rising chat, that they realised you had to see it in your hand to understand it. Again, it goes back to the e-commerce thing.
Yeah,
we have a real difficulty because what we do, people have to make that leap of faith initially through pictures on the internet and videos and what we're trying to do to convey what it is. But the Mora especially, people had to see it in front of them, and then they went, I know what you were trying to do and I love it. So it's that if you are going to go off-piste, it kind of pays to somehow get people to see it in person, especially in Watchland, before you can judge if it's a success or not, I guess.
So that makes a lot of sense to me. So where it is a business, yes, you have to judge that, right? You have to look at your surroundings, you have to look at the environment, and you have to judge that. I think in kind of personal, social life, it's much more up to you, right? The stakes are a lot lower, I guess. And Tommy, I'd say you have been someone who has carved their own path a little bit, just in terms of the way you go about stuff, and that you don't really care that much about what people think sometimes. I'm not talking about this in terms of your business. I'm talking about this and I mean this as a compliment. And how you go about a lot of the things that you do. I find it brilliant. I find it inspiring a lot of the time. You're on mute, by the way.
Thank you. That's very kind. I would say I think the first thing I think is so important in life is to be proactive.
Yeah.
And don't be that dead fish that is just literally just going with the flow. I think the most important thing that I try to give with my team and with my children is you've got to be proactive, make the most of every day, make the most of all the resources you've got, and make the most of the feedback that you're getting, the most of your ideas. So that is so important, and I certainly read that from this dead fish sketch. The other, and Gordon, you made this comment, which I also, we thought we were being really clever, right? And I have that feeling occasionally where I'm like, oh yeah, I'm doing this, I think this is a really clever idea, and And unfortunately, that is often where I stumble, because I'm trying to show that I am clever rather than that the idea is clever, or I'm doing it in the hope that people say, oh, that's really clever. Whereas as soon as you start focusing on that, personally, I found that's when I then trip up.
As opposed to looking at the product and the needs of your customers.
Yes, doing something for the sake of trying to look clever rather than for the sake of people wanting it.
I think a lot of people are searching for that Steve Jobs iPhone reveal moment where people go, I never knew I wanted this, but I wanted it. Yeah. I think that's the pinnacle, isn't it? You launch a watch and people go, I didn't realise I needed this until now.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's a very strict frame that we work within. It's a wristwatch. It's a luxury in terms of, it's not a necessary object.
Yeah.
But we're always striving for that kind of grand reveal, and people go, I need this right now. It's a hard thing to master, I think.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I was glad you started, Gordon, about like the different reasons people buy watches, because I think watches are they're kind of a fascinating product. Like we did an episode on Veblen goods, and Veblen goods are ones which are more valuable the more expensive they are, which is and like a Rolex is a classic thing. Like it's desirable because it's sort of out of reach for most people, and so watches, they don't like behave necessarily like, not like, they're not like buying a mop, which has got to be really good at washing your floor, and people can tell the time on their phone. So there's a lot of complex and subtle reasons why people are buying watches. So in a way, I think of it as it's a bit like buying candles. Like nobody particularly needs to buy a lot of candles these days, but they sell a lot of candles. So
and they're a lot of expensive candles.
Yeah, and so it becomes and watches, but a watch, candles are simple, but watches are like this.
Yeah.
It is incredibly hard. It's like, if I think of what is there's a you must have been there, in the British Museum, there's a clock gallery in London, and it's like one of the coolest rooms in London, and it's got these incredible mechanical clocks from 150 years ago or something like that, or more. And you think of like the pinnacle of what is a complicated thing, and it's like a watch mechanism, and you have this like really complicated psychology of why people are buying these products in the first place. And I just think it's a really fascinating and yet difficult space to operate in.
It is, let me tell you. You've got the added pressure as well that our watches, we only design mechanical watches, and if you look after this and you have it serviced regularly, this watch will last not just your life but multiple lifetimes. And so you're designing from a perspective of this object will be here forever. And so you've got to design from a perspective kind of ignorant of fad or trend or anything that's happening right now, and look beyond that to what will, it's timeless, isn't it? It's the thing that will kind of transcend multiple generations and still be relevant or valid or exciting. So it's a little extra bit of pressure on top of all the other pressures.
Yeah.
So how can we summarise what we're saying about this sketch? It feels to me that there are definitely times when you probably need to consider, if you look at it more as a scale than a binary thing, I think perhaps, and depending on the situation, you might be at different points. You might need to place yourself at different points on that scale between carving your own path and going with the flow. And you probably you probably want to try and avoid being at the absolute extreme of that scale on either side, and just be playing somewhere around in the middle, depending on the situation. Does that feel like a decent summary of that?
I think so. Yeah, we've found the boundaries of where not to go now with various designs. But yeah, I think that's a great way to say it.
Let me caveat that within business. I think in your personal life, sometimes it's quite fun to go right on the extreme and see where that ends up, like in social life or something. I don't quite know what I'm picturing with that, but
I don't know either, because I'm married and there's very strict rules involved in that.
I think I'm thinking some of Tommy's parties. All right, let's.
Well, I was trying to think. I was going to ask, like, when do you think you've in your life swam against the current, done your own thing, not where everybody else is going?
Well, I changed my career. I'd say that I see that as a bit of moment when I was told, "Oh, look, getting into telly is really, really hard. You know, very few people actually make it. You know, you're probably better off just sticking with your job or get another job." I feel that was a bit of a moment for me personally that stands out.
Seriously impressive.
Yeah, definitely. I thought of like here's an example I really like, which is like on totally the completely simple side of it. There's a sketch I did. It was one of the first like 100 or something, which was use both sides of a buffet. And it sounds ridiculous, but you know when there's like a big line of food at a buffet at a conference or something, and everybody's queuing up for the food and waiting ages, maybe for the whole of lunchtime, just in a queue to get the food, and yet a buffet has two sides. So I always steadfastly swim against the current and go my own way and just go from the other side.
Nice.
But there, I mean, the consequences, you know, I don't go out of business, and I can still pay the bills, you know. So yeah, maybe you're right. Different extremes.
Our business was founded upon going against how it's done. I don't know if Rob's mentioned how we started, but it was out of the blue that Oliver and I came together, an email. And
Oliver's your business partner, Gordon.
Yeah, so Oliver was living in Sweden at this point, and he saw the kind of blossoming watch market in Sweden and said, I can do this, but I have no idea how to design anything. And so he went looking for a designer, and stumbled through a list of people and then arrived at me. And he pitched what he wanted to do, and I said, no thanks. And then a couple of weeks later I went, that was a shame, I should have jumped at the chance. And so I wrote back and I said, right, okay, let's talk about this a bit more. And so we began talking, and after about 3 or 4 weeks we went, right, let's do this together. And then from that point, we didn't meet in person for 2 years. We just did it all over the internet. So we launched 2 watches to market, sold all these watches, and hadn't met once in person. It was only after 2 years that we met in person, we went, oh, right, this is a real thing. Yeah, that was going against, because all the way along those 2 years, we had people saying to us, what are you doing? Who is this person?
Yeah.
You don't know them. They could be fleecing you, or they could be anybody. But it was just a huge ball of trust and reading people. You know, we both had the measure of each other and thought, yeah, we're both swimming in the same direction. So let's do it together. So that was a big moment for me, you know, going against all that.
I think a big word you've used there in that is that that you need, if you are going to go against the flow, is trust, right?
Oh, hugely. Trust is everything.
Yeah.
Yeah,
trust in your idea, trust in your ability, trust in your team, or, you know, whatever it might be. You need that trust to, I guess, that then yields the confidence and the motivation that you need.
Aye, and knowing which seeds of doubt to cast aside. You know, you can let seeds of doubt grow, but it's just kind of knowing which ones to say, right, well, okay, we'll ignore that one for now. And luckily, you know, the seeds of doubt weren't cast for us till now. You know, we've never really questioned each other's motivations, because we both know that we're both driving towards, you know, being in this place in this industry of kind of uniqueness. So
yeah. Brilliant, lovely. Listen, I'm going to move us on to our second sketch that you selected, Gordon. So it's called Prince and Performances. Prince with a T, not like princes and princesses. Prince and Performances. I'd say, Jono, it's one of maybe just a few sketches in your collection that are, I'd say, more kind of art driven. So, Jono, what's the sketch and what is it about?
Yeah, it is just a drawing of Half Dome, which is a mountain in Yosemite Valley in California. And it's the quote. The quote is from Ansel Adams, who is one of the foremost American photographers. And the quote is, "The negative is the score, the print is the performance." And very much I was trying to evoke the feel of an Ansel Adams photo in the style of the sketch when I put it there. But it's something that when I heard his view on it through that quote, it just resonated with me at the time. And so there's not much to it from a sketch point of view, other than it is very much, I hope, if you know Ansel Adams' work, reminiscent of his photography as well.
Right, so Gordon, I mean, I can imagine this metaphor and this mantra is something that you bring into many different parts of your work and your life outside work, perhaps as well. What is it about this sketch that appeals to you? I mean, it's easy to think about your photography as maybe a very obvious place to start, but I'm sure it comes into a lot of the other creative outlets that you have.
Yeah, it comes into everything. A watch is a pretty simple thing. It's a movement and a case and hands and a dial and glass to sandwich it all together, and that's it. So that's a negative. Everybody knows what a watch is. But if you just attack it from that perspective, give them the specs, it can go to 100 meters or sapphire crystal, whatever. That's no use to anybody. It's why it exists and why we've done it and what drives us and what motivates us and why this object exists, and framing it around something that is inspiring to us, that engages people. It's the why of the thing rather than just the raw kind of blueprint. So that's why I chose this. I think it's all about the performance. It's all about why are you singing this way? What is it about you that draws people towards you? And funnily enough, we're right in the middle of the kind of tail end of our kind of biggest watch to date for me. It's called the Daytimer, and it came out of a process of quite difficult design difficulty, or say difficult twice there. Quite complex design psychology. I was fed up with everything that I was designing at the time, not in terms of our catalogue, but what I was producing from the sketches and on the computer.
Yeah.
Every time I got to a point, I thought, that's no good. I'm not happy with it. And Oliver noticed my kind of despondency and said, what's going on? Why have you stopped dreaming? What is it about your design language that is causing you to stumble? And so we're really forming this Daytimer campaign around the result of that, which was I designed a watch for me. What drives me? What excites me? What got me into watch design in the first place? What about a watch inspires me? And we're building around the concept of dreamers. So there's a poem. It was my daughter watching it one day. There's a point where Violet licks the wallpaper, and she goes Snozzberry, and Willy Wonka says, "We are the music makers, and we are the dreamers of dreams." You don't have to pigeonhole anything. You can do whatever you want, and we can do whatever we want. We start every project with a total blank page, infinity at our disposal, and we can do whatever we want. And quite often that can bind you, can bind the cogs of creativity, or it can unleash you into wild flights of fantasy. And so we're building this campaign around dreamers. And why did I stop dreaming? Because dreaming is essential to creativity and producing your finest work.
producing that performance.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You can have all the parts, but it's useless to you if you're not happy and you're not willing to dream and, find out new things and let yourself just be inspired. Yeah, it's because of that I chose the Ansel Adams sketch.
I mean, you are the photographer for all of your watches and all of the images that you have up on the website and that you use in your sales and your marketing. Do you photograph outside of that as well? Do you enjoy photography? So do you, in that sense, does this sketch also resonate with you? Do you enjoy editing those photos and making something of them once you bring them home? And I guess same with your filmmaking and well, and the watch design we talked about. But yeah, it's interesting for me that if you see this in different aspects of what you do and not just your professional activities.
Oh, totally. I think it applies to everything from a creative perspective. I photograph like I breathe. It's one of my biggest passions outside of watch design. And I used to be a guy that was really stressed over what my photographs and what was taken and technically if it was any good. I've now reached a point where I don't really care about any of that stuff. I just photograph what makes me happy and what inspires me, and we moved to the Isle of Skye last year, and if there ever was a place to inspire photography, it's the Misty Isle. And so, I've let go of relinquished the shackles of pixel peeping and worrying about all that kind of stuff. Because I guess at a certain point you become quite proficient at something. If you do it enough, you become good at it just by the sheer kind of volume of doing it. And so you end up having to trust yourself that you are good at composition and you are good at framing and exposure. You've got all that stuff in the bag, so you can just concentrate on spotting it where you think that's interesting. So it does feed into that. You could tweak it till the cows come home, but I've become quite efficient at going, there's a photo, there's the kind of rough edit, and then that's the photo, that's it, and I leave it and don't go back to it.
And your performance then is that is the live style that you're bringing into your composure and how you're setting up and how you're framing everything. That is your performance, I guess. And the negative, if you want to take that metaphor, is the fact that you're going out with your camera and taking photos. But then, or maybe the negative is the kind of strict rules around it. But the performance is, well, this is how I'm interpreting that.
I guess so. Again, it feeds into your capabilities as anything, as a photographer, a writer, whatever. You get to a certain point, and you're comfortable with that glass and metal block in your hand. You're comfortable putting it up to your face, and it just becomes part of you if you do it enough. Like I say, I photograph like I breathe. I've always got my camera, and so at any point, if I see something, it's there, it's done. And I guess the performance is quite a subtle one, but. I say that like my photographs are world renowned. The only people that see my photographs are my mum and my wife. But I get a lot of enjoyment out of it because it feeds into everything. That's my creative outlet. It's my way to kind of express what is unsaid in the watch. Because watch photography is very strict. You're doing macro photography. You have to capture details, and it's very a way to show stuff. Whereas when I go out with my camera, I do it just for me. And it's just a way for me my mind to relax and just settle into the kind of prism,
Yeah, Tommy, where are your performances from the kind of foundations of what a negative will give you? Where do you think in your life you are able to perform and put your own spin on or your own styles on activities?
That's a very good question, Rob. You see, this is where I kind of feel that I'm not really a designer.
Well, no, but I don't think it.
Very good at
I don't think it has
photography, and this is really, really beautiful. And I'm just I'm obsessed with your Instagram feed and those photos that you take have just been just such beautiful imagery. And
but But I think, can I suggest one for you, Tommy? When you were on The Apprentice, I feel like it's a little bit with the dead fish and the live swimming fish here, but your performance on that was very different to everybody else's in your cohort, everybody else's that had come before. I feel, that was your personal take on it. That was your style. That was you. It is. I guess we're probably coming back more to the fish metaphor, but that was you, unashamedly being you, and it stood out.
Yeah, I suppose I am fortunate to have had a very good family, and I have a certain set of kind of fairly strong, in my belief, morals of sort of how to treat people, how I'd like to treat people, no matter what the situation. And on the Bake Off, I would have just been a very normal person. On The Apprentice, I was different from the really kind of pushy stereotype, which is possibly what you're referring to, maybe there. But yeah, I do love questioning things and going, well, if it's always been done this way, well, maybe that's not right. Maybe we could do it in a slightly different way. I do like to ask the question of, with anything in life, we're doing it this way, well, could we do it the other way, or is there something different? And often that gets you into trouble. But often you also find there is another side of the buffet that you just start doing that. And occasionally, people have also thought of that, just for whatever reason, they just prefer to follow someone else doing it. And I think actually the people who follow people like me are the most brave. Not because if I go and do it, I'm just a bit crazy and a bit different. But if someone then follows me, then they're following the crazy person. So that's a bit more questionable potentially. But thank you, Rob.
Jono, where are you with prints and performances? 'Cause again, that's similarly to Gordon, you've got a number of creative outlets.
Yeah, well, I mean, I resonate at first with this quote because of photography, right?
Yeah.
So it is a metaphor. It's a music metaphor for photography because he was a photographer, and it was at the sort of time where like digital photography was really taking off, and for me, it was also like, I remember when HDR photos, high dynamic range photos came out, it's like, oh wow, you can get so much more out of the picture. So you take the photo and then you can work on it and make it much better. And I remember at the time, in some ways, it felt a bit like a cheat. So I was like, well, you didn't like, that photo looks amazing. And this was happening all the time. You look on Flickr or something, incredible photo, and you're like, well, it wasn't exactly like that when they stood there. They've done all sorts of stuff to it, and yet you might still love it. And so one of the things I liked about it was it made me realise that Ansel Adams, like the dawn of photography, like he was carrying around a tripod and plates, massive heavy plates, and he had to do these exposures over multiple minutes, and put his head under the blanket kind of photography, that kind of thing. And he'd been doing this for years and years ago, in the sense that what you did is you went out in the field, you tried to take the best, like the perfect negative, capture as much as you can, and then you're not done. You've still got you can still express your artistic vision of it. And then maybe if you do that enough, and perhaps you get a bit like Gordon, you just see it and you capture it there and then in the moment in the field. That's it, you're done. But also I quite like the idea that you go, actually what I've done is I've captured the information, I've got stuff to work with here now. And his photos are incredibly striking and memorable. But he was doing what in those days was called dodging and burning in the darkroom, like lightening areas, darkening areas, which is what you do on like Photoshop and all the photo editing tools that you do these days. And that's okay. It's okay because you're making your artistic vision. And so for me, I think that was, I don't know, it was quite interesting for me because I guess I felt a bit conflicted, like working on I say working on photos, but like tweaking them afterwards, doing stuff to them. Like, is that okay? Is that cheating? And so one of the reasons I liked it was because of that, just straight from the photography aspect.
Yeah, I'm desperately trying to think. I mean, sometimes this is not. I will tell by your reactions if this is appropriate application of this metaphor or not. Sometimes I'll take a piece of IKEA furniture and I will what do you call it? Upcycle? Well, not really. I mean, I haven't kind of got it from a scrap heap. I've taken it from my house sometimes. And I've just made it better. I've added stuff. I've taken it into the workshop. I've added stuff. I've made my own handles out of concrete. I've, added a bit of trim. I've painted it. I've put my new style on it. So is the IKEA build the negative, and the print is my finished version of it?
You've bought like basic wardrobe number one.
Yeah,
and you've applied Rob's artistic vision on top.
Yeah.
That's some ways.
That is a creative outlet that I have that I think where that probably applies the most for me. Because how does it apply with music? You can't apply you can apply a music metaphor to music, but then it's not a metaphor anymore.
No, it's just real. Like you go, I can buy Chopin's symphony or whatever.
Yeah.
And doesn't mean it's going to sound like the London Philharmonic playing Chopin's symphony. Like it's in the way the conductor did his performance. It's in all the artists who did it. They're the ones who bring it to life in that moment. And you've just got these sort of instructions. And I think about it like I was thinking about like cooking. It's such a great example, right? Just because you've got a recipe book doesn't mean you're suddenly going to be. And like we've got recipe books of incredible chefs. It doesn't mean they come out like incredible chefs, and they've told us exactly how they do it, but it doesn't come out like that. And I think the same with mixes in music. Like people write a song, and you take the song and you go, actually, I like some of the mixes better than I like the original.
Yeah,
and people have applied their own, and you're like, that's okay.
That's great.
That's another way of doing it. So I think you could, it's just reality in music.
And I think, reality rather than the metaphor. I think an important point that Gordon made there was that you don't have to be expertly skilled in whatever activity we're talking about in order for it to be your performance. You can still make. Let's take the cooking, for example. You make it however you can, and if you were more skilled and if with more experience in 3 more years of doing it, maybe it would be slightly more finessed. But that doesn't devalue your performance at any one time because you don't necessarily have the experience and have accumulated a load of skills in that area. I think that's a really important point to make on this for me, anyway. That feels encouraging. That feels kind of quite. Kind of knowing that feels a safer place to explore with your performances, I feel.
I think a lot of that comes with maturity and age. You for a lot of your life or your formative years, you're looking to differentiate yourself and be the one that's doing something different. But you get to a certain point in life and you go, I'm just happy where I am and what I'm doing. And people like it, then great. If they don't, then they don't. And that's also okay.
Yeah.
I think the more you expose yourself to masters of craft and people who are really kind of trailblazing, you'll hear them say, I don't ever stop learning. They're always finding new things. It's just that they might be at a different point in their creative trajectory than you are. So I don't think you can ever devalue where you're at because it's not as good as other people. You are where you are, and people find value in what you're doing as well as other people. So never ever worry that you're no good. Just keep going, and I think you will eventually become comfortable with your own abilities and where you sit in the grand scheme of things.
And this coming from the man who was at the top of the podcast talking about imposter syndrome.
I know. Well, I did say 10 years and 8 of those were imposter. I feel a lot more comfortable now. I think going through that process with the daytimer where I was no happy, I think that was the real point at which I thought, what is it that why am I not happy? and I went through a process to discover happiness, and it was through dreaming and opening yourself up to dream and be willing to dream. I think was the kind of process I went through, and from that point, everything improved in our design DNA. All the designs that came after that were all better. All the language that we were using was all better because I got out of my own way and stopped worrying about where I, worried about criticism, and I worried about where we sat in the world. Just trust yourself and do what you do and believe that you have the ability to do it. And sure enough, things just got easier after that point.
There's the word trust again. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's brilliant.
I was going to say, and maybe this is more for Tom, but Gordon, you've started a business as well. Like I usually think, for business, I think this quote applies to me. In fact, maybe hugely so, because I was massive when we came out of university. I was massive on ideas. I love ideas, coming up with new ideas and stuff, and ideas for new products and things. And I think the more my career's gone on and I've worked on more businesses and projects and products, you realize that ideas are pretty, well, I don't know. I think in business, ideas are quite cheap, and actually like ideas in this case for me are like the negative, and the print is like the performance is the execution. Like, you made a watch company work, and watches have been around forever. So why do we need a new watch company? But it's all about the execution. And so that's why I think it's, it's easy to go, oh, here's an idea for this. Or I thought of that first before, Elon Musk did. But actually, you make it happen. And that's in business what the performance is. It's the execution. And so, Tom, you've been doing that left, right and centre for years. Like, it's fine to say, oh, I could have thought a curved nail file. Maybe I don't know if anybody had thought of a curved nail file, but a lot of people could have thought of it. Yeah. But you actually made it happen, and you turned it into a business. And so I feel like business, the execution is like the performance of it.
You're absolutely right. The execution, and you're also right about the fact that the ideas are maybe the negative. And I would say that the problem that people want being solved, I find, is the most important bit. Finding the problems of what people want is, ideas can be cheap, but if the idea isn't solving a problem that actually people want to buy and for a certain price, then that's not going to work at all, kind of thing. So the execution so important. And I loved your quote from a couple of weeks ago. The diamonds are in the detail. And I suspect Gordon has a very, very true, resonate with that. Looking at how much of you must spend a huge amount of your time looking at things that are like less than a millimetre big, I'd imagine. Gordon.
I do, and we had a bit of a debate. We've got a really flourishing and positive fan group on Facebook, started by somebody else, but we're part of it just to see what's going on.
Yeah.
And we put out an email with some macro shots, and there was a huge debate on this texture that we'd used on the daytime. It's a honeycomb texture, but we'd inverted it. Usually you have a flat surface and you cut lines into it to create the honeycomb, but we pushed the squares down, so you ended up with kind of mountains, like lines in the opposite direction. And there was a huge debate about this, if this was the right thing to do, and what are you playing at? You're going to, this can't be done. And those squares were 0.2 of a mil across.
0.2, amazing.
It has no bearing on anything, but there was a huge debate about this honeycomb texture.
I can't even see 0.2.
No. Yeah. So it's funny, I do go into that level of detail. But in the offing, in the reality of it, it doesn't really matter that much.
Yeah, but it matters to a lot of people.
It really does. It really does.
It matters to you.
It matters when it matters. And this is one of the tricky things about design and inventing and bringing products to market, is finding those things where it really does matter.
Well, I say that details don't matter, actually. Through this process of the daytime as well, I've become really intolerant to imperfection. So in the past, I would just compromise and say, look, right, we need to get this out in the market.
That's enough.
Go. Yeah. I've stopped doing that. And I now say, no, it's got to be absolutely perfect. And it's funny because we've got pre-production samples in for this daytimer, and I sent them to Oliver to look at them. And he's going, I don't know what you're complaining about. These look great. But for me, there's so many bits on that I need to improve before it goes to market. I'm completely intolerant of imperfection. So the details do matter. I lied to you there. They absolutely do matter to me.
Well, that is interesting. That is interesting because we did spend quite a bit of time discussing this not too long ago. Was it Sharpen the Saw? No, I can't remember what episode it was.
Law of Diminishing Returns.
Was it Law of Diminishing Returns? Yeah, okay. Yes. 80-20 rule. When is enough enough? Yeah.
It's the one.
But again, and I'll come back to the fish metaphor on this. It's the scale, right? Sometimes it's applicable, other times it's not.
Yeah.
Yeah. Brilliant.
Okay, so I'm at that point in my career where if I'm putting something out that will define what we're doing, it's got to be absolutely perfect in my eyes.
Yeah. There we go. Listen, before we round this episode off, Gordon, Jono, Tommy, is there anything that you'd like to bring up about the topics we've discussed that we haven't covered yet?
I've got 100 questions about watches. But I don't think that's fascinated. But not within this context. I think lots of it.
Gordon, I was just going to ask, maybe when you look back at the 10 years, like, what are you most proud of there?
Our growth hasn't been linear. If you were to look at how we've kind of went through the years, it's almost horizontal in terms of our kind of progress, because we've had so many setbacks. We're very small. For a long time, it was just Oliver and I doing everything. And so we've learned through a process of kind of trial by fire. We don't come from the industry, we haven't been in the industry, we started from zero. And so we had to find out everything for the first time, every time. And so over the 10 years, we've had to kind of develop this huge tolerance to disappointment and compromise and trying to forge that path through brute force, because there's so many pitfalls and there's so many trapdoors. And so I think I'm just proud that we're still here. There's so many points in that 10 years where there's so many points in those 10 years where we could have just said, that's enough of that. I'm done.
Yeah.
Forget this.
Yeah.
Like showstoppers, where we went, no, let's just sleep on it, come back in the morning, and we'll see where it is we need to go. And we've done that for 10 years. It's never been easy, and I'm not saying that to get sympathy. It's just the way it is in business, and especially in kind of the micro brand watch industry market. It's really tough. But we've endured, and we've adapted and survived, and especially during the COVID year as well. Goodness, we were so lucky during that phase of the world, and we just endured, and we're here, and we're doing it still. A wee bit more grey on the head, but yeah, I think we're just proud to just keep trucking and keep doing it, and just keep trying to develop ourselves to be better at what we do.
Massive respect.
Thank you.
Gordon, you could argue that you boys had an advantage during COVID in that for the first 2 years you guys were working remotely, and everybody else was then trying to have to catch up on that. Whereas you guys set up your whole company based on not being in the same place at the same time.
Yeah. Oliver and I don't work from the same office. So Oliver's down in Sonning Common, and I'm up in Isle of Skye. But during lockdown, he was in the Netherlands, and I was in Kinross in Scotland, just north of Edinburgh. And we'd just moved the office up to Scotland in January of 2020, and then by April it was lockdown, and we weren't able to hire anybody, weren't able to get help because of protocol. And so for the first 6 months of me having the office under my wing, I was doing everything: design, shipping, customer service, stock control, everything just run off my feet. at the same time as dealing with this huge kind of human experience that we're all going through. It was quite remarkable. What you're looking back on it, what had to be done. But as I said, we benefited. We were one of the lucky ones during COVID, where our business, because everyone was sitting at home buying hot tubs and smoking jackets, we benefited from folk going, I'm going to buy a watch.
Yeah.
And so our business grew during COVID, and it was great because it gave us a really exposure, and it kind of settled our business quite substantially. But personally, I was near death. Yeah. I might have to rephrase that actually, because that's not good. I can't say that. How can I say that differently?
Oh, I was a dead fish.
Yeah. It was not good, but it's all part of the big melting pot of life, isn't it? You just go through these things and you just adapt and survive, and off we go.
Yeah. Agreed. Again, another theme that we talk about quite a lot on here. Gordon, is there anything from you or from Marloe coming up soon that we should be keeping our eye out for? Basically, anything you want to plug.
2024 for us is the year of events. We're really getting out there, and we're really trying to get in front of people and just expose more people to Marloe Watch Company. So we've got 24 events planned this year. Some kind of really small watch boffin events, and other more associated events. National Motor Museum we're in partnership with them as official timing partners. We're doing a lot of their events. So you'll start to see a lot of us around, which is great. But yeah, I think just visit marlowatchcompany.com and give us a wee like and see what you think. And
I know you. I mean, I don't know if this is still the case, but you definitely used to have quite an open door policy with your head office. Is that still the case? So if anyone is around 100%. something common,
100%. So our new office in Sonning Common is geared towards customers coming to see us. It's a beautiful building in an old barn. In actual fact, next month we're about to employ an in-house watchmaker, our first watchmaker. She's coming on board to head up our progression into assembly and servicing and maintenance, which is a real kind of feather in the cap of any watch company to have in-house
lovely
expertise. So yeah, we're so excited about that.
So then, if you are in the Sonning Common, what are we talking about? Is that kind of Hertfordshire? Is that or Berkshire?
Henley.
It's near Marloe,
near Henley on Thames.
Yeah. So I think it's west of Henley on Thames. So we used to be in Lower Shipleak, but it's kind of west of there, somewhere down a leafy lane.
Oxfordshire. It's out that way. It's out west of London, along the Thames that way. Sonning Common. If you're around the area, if you're passing, go and check it out, because they're lovely guys to go and chat watches and see the lovely collection. And as far as I'm aware, and from what Gordon says, you are always welcome.
All the time, always.
Gordon, listen, that's been a really fascinating conversation. It's lovely. It's so lovely to speak to someone who's so passionate about what they do, and is unapologetic about the level of detail that they love to spend and feel that they need to spend in their work. I'm always really inspired by and inspired and moved actually by people who can translate their ideas into this creativity, into something very tangible, like the mechanical watches that you guys create. So I am left inspired and moved at the end of this episode as well. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you for having me. It's been a real privilege to speak to you.
Absolutely our pleasure.
Additionally, that conversation has confirmed the hypothesis I put forward at the beginning of the podcast, that I am the least cool person on here, and I'm fine with that. We'll be going through some of your listener correspondence since the previous episode in just a moment, and please send us your thoughts and experiences on anything we've talked about here to our email hello@sketchplanations.com or on our social media platforms. I'm just going to have a quick look for black roll neck jumpers on the M&S website. But until next time, thank you for listening. Go well, stay well, goodbye.
Cheers.
All music on this podcast series is sourced from the very talented Frank Cinelli. And you can find loads more tracks at frankcinelli.com.